Welcome to the Insurance Wise Guys podcast. My name is Mike Lewis, insurance agency owner of Archibald & Lewis Insurance and your insurance wise guy. On today's episode of Know, Like, and Trust, we have Brooks LeFever of Hiday Automotive. All right. Just a few months back, Hiday Automotive Group was voted best place to buy a new car, and lucky for them, my guest today was voted best new auto salesperson. He literally has grown up at Hiday, starting from the bottom. Everybody help me welcome Brooks LeFever. Brooks, how's it going?
It's going well, buddy. How are you?
I am fantastic. Let's start by telling me something that I would never guess about you.
Oh boy. Good, bad, and different?
Good, bad, just something that maybe not me, but maybe somebody else would never guess or never know about you.
Oh boy. I'm OCD. I'm scared of snakes. I mean, petrified of snakes. I go to bed as early as old people. I get up as early as old people. I don't know. I'm kind of boring.
The snake is good.
I mean, I can't even look at them on TV.
It's like you're Indiana Jones.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
No snakes. If it has bumps, scales, or no legs, I'm not touching it. Except a fish. I'll take a fish off a hook.
All right.
But that's as far as it goes.
Okay. All right. Well, let's turn back the clock with me. You graduated high school, and you're off to your first job. Shortly thereafter, I'm going to say you started at Hiday's, but you started at the bottom. So bring me up to speed of your employment history leading to Hiday's, at Hiday's, and then where you are today.
Okay. I graduated from South Adams in 2010. I did about at Ball State, and I did about at Ivy Tech, learning that college wasn't for me. So in our area, there's a lot of different areas you can go into without a college degree. I started at Swiss Village in high school in the dietary department, and then after I'm just going to say quit college, I started working full-time and then worked my way up to being the lowest of the managers. So after doing that for a while, I realized that until the people ahead of me, because there's 3 people ahead of me, retired or quit, there wasn't really any room for advancement. It was a great place to work, but I needed a change. And then it was just by word of mouth that I found out that a couple household names in Bluffton were retiring from Hiday's. I contacted one of the salesmen that was there at the time that I knew. He got me in contact with Greg. I had 2 interviews, and then they decided to give me a shot. So here I am 7 years later, still employed.
You started at the bottom then when you came back.
I started at the bottom. The problem, and it's not really a problem, but in Bluffton, people go to who they know.
Sure.
People stay in that field forever. I was competing against 2 guys that had been, they set the standard for auto sales in Bluffton when it came to Chevy products. One guy was selling for 44 years. The other guy had worked at a couple different dealerships. He's very well known in the community. That didn't leave much for the guy that's from Geneva that didn't know anybody. Bluffton's just like Geneva. There's just more people. Everybody knows everybody, except for when you just move in and you're the stranger. People are like, oh, who's that kid? Or, what's your lineage? And then you have to go through, here's my grandparents, here's where they live, here's where I live, here's my parents. You just go through.
That's important in a small town for people to know you and start to trust you for sure.
That's been beneficial. If I can say who I'm related to, that might create a conversation that leads to something else that sometimes can lead to a sale because, he's so-and-so's grandson. I know her. I've known her forever. I worked with her or him or whatever it might be. And then that opens up a whole nother line of communication to where they're more comfortable, they're more confident. People only buy from people they like.
Absolutely.
So if they don't trust you, no matter what you're trying to sell, if they don't like you, they're probably not going to buy it.
Going on their way. So that leads me into the next thing that I was going to talk about. So it just a few months back, that was quite an honor that you were voted the best.
That was a shock.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So why do you think, what do you think that you do that people would have voted you into that position, the number one? What do you think is setting you apart there?
I would say everyone that works at Hiday Motors is honest. But even Larry Hiday has told me that I sometimes go above and beyond. He said sometimes you do a little too much. You're a little too honest. You might give a little bit too much information. But the thing is that I tell people what I would want to know or be told. I treat people how I would want to be treated. And sometimes it is just taking that extra time to get to know your customers that leads you to that point. Breaking down those barriers, communicating, and then it's just having a conversation. I've had customers at my desk, we're trying to work a deal, and you can tell that wall, it starts to go up.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll physically flip over the paper and say, hey, let's just take a quick break. Let's change the subject a little bit, and then let's come back to it. But what that might lead to is you saying one thing that was that barrier breaker.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I physically walked out of the room and said, hey, this is a decision between you folks. I don't need to be part of this. I'm going to close the door and come get me when you're done. I don't know how many cars I've sold because of that, because you're not forcing it down someone's throat. It's a conversation. It's not a sale.
Okay.
Which makes them more comfortable, which makes your job easier. Because I always tell people, I can't help if you don't tell me what I need to help you with.
Yeah.
If you just say, hey, no, not interested, I need to know why. And that's where we really work together. Because,
so you can help them solve the problem at that point.
Correct.
If you know what they're looking for, why they're looking for it, and a lot of people do put up those barriers. So that's probably the best answer that I could have imagined. Is just tell me how I can help you.
Right.
Because I've heard people before say, "What would you do? What would you do?" And being honest to a fault, I'm sure really helps.
Yeah, because car salesmen as a whole, we get a bad rap. We're the scum of the earth. We're like politicians and lawyers. No offense to anybody out there. People come in not trusting us.
Sure.
So, when people say, well, I don't like salesmen. Well, great, I don't either. And then they laugh, and then, that's one barrier that you already jumped over and you don't even realize it.
Right.
So.
Right. So this year especially with the pandemic has been a tough year for a lot of areas, a lot of work areas. What do you think is the biggest challenge in your industry today, and do you think that challenge is directly affected to the pandemic?
Availability.
Availability
of vehicles, parts, accessories. What people don't realize is that we have to sell to get vehicles back to sell. It's not just, hey, we turn in all these orders to GM or Chrysler or whoever it might be and say, hey, we want 5 trucks, 10 Equinoxes, and 2 Tahoes. Well, no, they give us one to sell, and then we don't get another one until we sell that one. So when the plants close down for 3 to 4 months, they're not worried about Hiday Motors in Bluffton, Indiana. They're worried about the big dealerships like in Fort Wayne, Indianapolis. They're feeding them first because they're feeding the bigger company first, if that makes sense.
The bigger mover, quicker
bigger mover. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
They're not worried about the little guy, because to us, we're dropping a bucket. I mean, we're just a face. I mean, we don't bring in billions of dollars like some dealerships do.
Mm-hmm.
But what's happened is that it is driven, because there's no new vehicles, it has driven up the want for used cars. Super late model, low miles. Well, the problem is that we're competing against all those other dealers that are struggling. They're used to having a couple thousand new cars. Now they have a couple hundred. We're competing against them to try and get those vehicles. So the problem is we probably have to pay more, but we can't ask more because everything's sold online. The days of driving from lot to lot to lot, that's over.
No kidding.
So when we have somebody come in, the average customer goes to 1.2 car lots before they make a purchase. And that is because of what we have online available. You can see the background, you can check service records, you can compare against comparable models out there in the world, you can do everything. So the 0.2 is you're shopping at home, the actual 1 in that number is showing up and buying the vehicle.
When they've made a decision that I want this one, and you're the lot that has that.
Correct.
At that point.
And being a small guy in Bluffton, we have to do all we can with that customer there. We don't have 10 customers behind them like they do in Fort Wayne. And that's part of being brutally honest and just spelling it out there. Hey, here's what I can do. Because people are still kind of in that mentality, and I was too. Whenever I used to buy cars individually and not through work, I thought they had $4 to $5 grand in markup. Well, they mark them way up to bring them way back down. Well, no, sometimes if you have a couple $100, you're doing good. Because the thing is that to get nice vehicles, you have to pay more. We can't ask the moon. We still have to remain in the market and be reasonable. Because if we don't, we're not going to get the phone calls, internet clicks. You know, people aren't going to look at us online. If they think we're out of line on price, they're going to keep scrolling. They don't care how clean it is. Yeah, because the normal consumer will not go past page number 2. If you're
on
not
their search.
On their search, if they go low to high, high to low, low miles, whatever, if you're not on those first 2 pages, they're never going to see it. So we're battling against ourselves too, because if we have 2 comparable vehicles, well, where do these stack up? So we need to make sure that they're within the running of everybody else too.
About sales, I know you carry a little card in your wallet, 10 steps to a sale. Tell me why you keep that card. Tell me a little bit of the history of where you got that and why that means something to you.
So I had to downgrade my carryings in my wallets. So now that I have that ingrained in my head so much, it's kind of a keepsake that I keep at home. But my first day at Hiday Motors, the gentleman that trained me took his business card and made a copy of the one that he had in his drawer, slapped it together and laminated it. He said, keep this in your wallet. This is the gospel. He said, you don't have to be aggressive with your customer if you have an aggressive game plan. So what that does is a lot of times in the steps of sale, you know, you meet your customer, you greet them, tell them who you are, see what they're looking for. That's your first conversation. You know, how you approach it, that's up to you. Each customer is going to be different. But the problem is that in the sales is that the customer wants to say, hey, I like this vehicle, but what's my trade-in worth? Well, hey, you know, ultimately the numbers don't mean anything if this isn't the vehicle that you want to own. So let's do this first to make sure it's going to work, and then we'll really fine-tune it and dive deeper and make sure, hey, this vehicle I want to own, I'll give you the best price possible for it, I'll give you the best trade-in value, and if you're financing, we'll make sure we give you your best financing options. It's just kind of that change as you go process to where, you know, you have to tailor make it to your customer. If they're guard up, okay, I have to say this. If they're a little too vocal, that's great. I'd rather have too much than not enough. But it's just going through those steps to kind of keep on a path. Because what happens when you skip steps is you miss things, whether it is that conversation or, well, I just looked at this one down the street. Perfect. Well, part of my sales process is opening the doors, the hood, the hatch, everything, and walking around it. Well, then, you know, they're $2,000 cheaper. Well, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, when we walked around it, you know, I pointed out these features. Did theirs have that? Well, no. Well, unfortunately, it's not apples to apples, and let me show you why. That's another conversation. It's one step to the next of where, I don't want to say you're taking your customer by the hand and walking with them, but you are.
Sure.
Hey, we'll get through this together, but there's a couple things I want to make sure of, that way nothing's missed.
Well, I would say that's an education as well, to walk around and to point out the differences, because things aren't apples to apples unless you make them that way, for sure. The something you said about what is my trade-in worth, and I hear that a lot too. What is my trade-in worth? But isn't it true that your trade-in value actually depends?
It does.
Okay.
There's no cut and dry. Hey, I have a 2015 Silverado 1500 crew cab with a V8. What's it worth? Well, hey, you know, that's like saying I have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. What's that worth? Well, we have to check the siding, the windows, the shingles. We have to do an inspection. You know, we have to check your tires. We have to take it for a test drive, check the brakes. But what a lot of people don't realize is how we do our pricing and our trade-in values. It's actually a live market analysis. So what we do is we take the VIN number, which will give us a year, make, model. We have to put in the miles, even the color will determine, because certain colors have better resale. And then what we do is we do an analysis within 200 miles of our dealership. So what that is, it is live that day. This is what vehicles are selling for. And I always use a 2-wheel drive truck. Well, if we do a trade-in value on a 2-wheel drive truck, where's it going to be worth more? Here or Texas? So we really have to narrow it down to our area, because in the event that we don't sell it or we can't sell it, okay, you know, here's what they're selling for in our area. Hopefully, if the market changes, because it's daily, we can still get this amount out of it. If not, then we sit on it. But the problem with our small area is that you have to keep your inventory so fresh, because if people are driving through seeing the same things over and over, they're going to stop driving through because they're going to wonder why it's still there.
Sure.
So that's all part of it too. Is this something we can sell? If it scares us to death, we call other dealers. It's called a buy bid. If somebody walks in with a McLaren, we don't know what that is. I mean, we obviously do, but we're going to call people that know more
Absolutely.
than what we do. But that's better for our customer too, because to us, it's a big risk. It's scary. We don't know it. If we call some guys in Fort Wayne that see them every day, what we're able to do is we're able to help that person by showing them a value that dealer is willing to pay, and then they buy it from us for what we show them a trade-in value for. Well, that's a tax credit for them. The dealership that buys it gets a quality vehicle, and they know exactly what they're buying. They're not buying it in Florida or California and trucking it here. They can come right down to Bluffton, look at it, and know exactly what they're buying, because when you can put your hands on something, you can typically offer more for it when you can really appreciate it. And that's no different than a normal trade-in.
You have a lot of good points, and even in your time there, you already have a lot of experience, I can tell, in handling different items like that. If I was a person getting into car sales, and I'm just starting, I'm coming in there, what one piece of advice would you tell me as a new salesman, or maybe a better question is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Be patient.
Patience.
Be honest, and do everything you can. Coming into sales, it realistically, I was told by every gentleman that I worked with, it takes at least 3 years. It takes 3 years to build up a solid clientele base to where you get repeat customers. It's no different than when you're a cosmetologist or an insurance agent. You have to get your name out there. You have to have so many clients to where, when they buy their next home, they're not shopping around for insurance as well. It's just like, hey, I need to call Mike. I got a new house. Hey, I got a new car. But really take the time to know what you're selling too. I can look at a vehicle and tell you based on a couple pieces on the exterior. I can tell if it has heated seats. I can tell if it has a power hatch. I can tell you what year it is based on the shade of red. You learn those things as you go, but optimize your downtime, which is also being patient, because you're waiting for that next opportunity, but you're making the most of it while you can.
I tell you what, when you know your product as a salesman, that feature alone to me makes you the best person to talk to, hands down. When you know your product, there is nothing worse than I'll have to check on that. Now that's a fair thing to say, because you can't possibly know everything.
Right.
But when you do take the time to study and know your product, I mean, hands down, it puts you ahead of everybody else. All right, let's talk straight about sales.
Okay.
What is it that makes some buyers do all their car shopping on Sundays when you are closed, the only day that you're not there? And why do you think that, you talked about this earlier, that car salesmen have that negative stigma to them? What do you think causes that?
It is the jumping down your throat. It's all about your approach. People say, I went to Fort Wayne, or I went to Indy, or whenever I was in Florida, they had guys standing on every corner. They walked up to my window. You can't do that in Bluffton. You're gonna push someone away. That's a little too forward. But we just get the bad rap like we're trying to screw people. I mean, we're here to help.
Now I have actually really seen that at Hiday's and from you personally, that you're not high pressure and you are overly honest, and that, again, those features right there would make me want to come see you over someone else for sure. But I do see that stigma in bigger lots, and maybe the ones that maybe they are moving more, but maybe they're not getting repeat customers.
Right, and that's one thing that Hiday Automotive Group as a whole kind of instills in us, from Larry, Brent, Greg, to everyone that I work with. We have had people tell us that they will pay more for a vehicle because we will never be the cheapest, ever. I don't care where you go, who you are, we'll never be the cheapest. But when you come in and you have an issue, you have a face to go to that's going to remember who you are. You can save all the money in the world, but when you have an issue, who are you going to call?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they're not going to know who you are. They're not going to know your story. I'm terrible with names. That is a downfall of mine. I'll remember your face. I'll remember how many kids you have, what you drive, but I might not remember your name.
Mm-hmm.
And that is no offense to anyone. I've always been terrible with names. I can remember details like that, but when you meet sometimes 20 or 30 people a day, it's nearly impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's still, taking the time to do those little things that make a big difference.
I feel very fortunate that you know my name. So now tell me, I'm sure there's a lot of people that always wonder this. When you are working through an offer with someone and you say, let me take that to my manager, and you leave the room. Tell me what happens there. Are you talking to somebody or are you getting coffee?
No, sometimes I might use the restroom. Sometimes that's my out. But you do talk to a person because, as salesmen being so small, we're trusted from upper management and the owners. Hey, I trust you to make a decision on the behalf of the business. If I couldn't trust you, you wouldn't be working here. So what you have to do as a salesman, this might be getting a little too deep into how we really do things, is that you can't just get up from the word go. If somebody says, hey, you have this listed for 20 grand, I'll give you 15. Okay, let me take that to my manager.
Sure.
Well, they're going to say you're an idiot. Go back and do your job. So what we have to do is say, hey, I appreciate the offer 15, but where's that coming from? But that's also part of the sales process. When you come back from a test drive, I'm going to ask you, hey, if I could make the numbers work for you, is this a vehicle you want to own?
Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of people will say yes, no, or maybe. Well, the problem is there is no maybe. It's either yes or no.
Absolutely.
And if you tell me no, I'm going to say, hey, that's great, but would you mind sharing with me why you feel that way or what's wrong with this vehicle? Is there something I'm missing? Do the tires feel funny? Are the brakes squishy? I don't know. But if I don't ask, you're not going to tell me.
Because with those questions, you're actually helping them
Correct.
Get to the yes, get to the vehicle that they're actually looking for.
And I like the line you use saying getting to the yes, because our main job in sales or in anything is to overcome objections.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a no, I need to know why.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever you're going through these things, you also build that rapport. Well, hey, that's a really low offer. Respectfully, I really do appreciate it. But let me show you why we're asking what we're asking. We go to bank values, we go to comparables, we can bring up comparable vehicles, how far away they are, how long that dealership's had them, what color they are, and we can say, hey, we're right within the line, because it'll tell us within 200 miles where we rank.
Mm-hmm.
Price, and then price, miles, it kind of groups all that together and shows us, hey, you could be a little bit better. And that's where I say, hey, I think we might be able to do a little bit, but I don't want to overpromise. $5,000, if we're making that kind of markup, oh boy, I'd be working part-time if I could.
Right.
We want to make enough to keep the lights on and, still pay the employees. And that's one thing that I've heard for years. Make enough to where it makes sense, but you don't want to make a whole bunch on the customer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's simple.
Yeah. Back to just being honest with somebody. Something else in the sales process, and this may go to the finance side, but people always question extended warranties.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about extended warranties in a sense that is it worth it? Is it a smart financial move for everyone, or what are your views on that?
I can be very short and sweet in this. Extended service contracts, because a warranty is implied. Mm-hmm. That's assumed. So we always say extended warranty or extended coverage. That way you put another term with it. Mm-hmm. That's just my OCD. See, I told you I had that.
Right.
It depends on the driving habits of the customer, and it really depends on the buying habits and the trading styles. If you have that person that buys a new vehicle every 2 to 3 years, service contracts don't benefit them. If you have that person that keeps them 5 to 6 years and they put 100 to 120,000 miles on them, of course. But a lot of times our cash buyers, they say, hey, I have enough money in the bank, I'll just pay for it out of my pocket. Well, hey, that's great, but Whatever the price of a part is, it's going to be double that for labor.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, we are one of the cheapest in the area, but we can't repair parts anymore. We replace them.
Mm-hmm.
But when everything's computered, wired, programmed with sensors, it's a lot more invasive, and you can't do it at home. Like myself, I get paid once a month. If I sell you a truck, I get a little piece of paper that says, hey, on the last day of the month, Brooks gets X amount of dollars for selling this vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like surprises when I get paid once a month. I have to have a budget in mind.
Fair, yeah.
Every family member I sell a vehicle to, it's pretty much a no ifs, ands, buts. They're going to get a warranty.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want to hear how much the repair cost is when they have an issue. I know that sounds bad, but help me to help you,
Very good.
entertain this.
Mm-hmm.
But service contracts as a whole get a really bad rap. People aren't explained what it truly is. I have nothing against financial institutions. We have some great banks here in town that they do offer their own service contracts, and they're quality. But the problem is that banks sell money. They sell loans. They don't sell vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
We offer what we know is going to cover things when you have an issue. Now, the big thing with what we offer is that we're the administrators, brokers, repair facility, and the parts department. When you have an issue, you don't call a call center in Arizona. You call Hiday Motors. You call Brooks.
So when you have someone that purchases a vehicle, and let's even just say it was a used vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
And you have an extended coverage or extended warranty on that, Hiday's is actually taking care of the service work, the repair work, honoring that warranty.
Yeah, so how this works, different programs offer different, I'm going to say, benefits. We have a mainstream offer, and we have a higher mile, a little bit older offering. The newer models, because they're normally under warranty, we like to sell a late model if we can. There's warranty in place, which makes the coverage that we offer essentially as close to bumper as we can, which also includes your powertrain. But when you have an issue, typically those warranties are set up to where you have a zero copay if we perform the repairs. But say a lot of people, they break down in Florida or their air conditioning stops working. Say you take it to a repair facility down there, it's a $100 copay. It's no different than being out of your network for your health care. It's a health care for your vehicle. That's what it is. It's health insurance. But what's nice too is that, say you are one of those people that decides to go from trading every 5 to 6 years to trading every 2 to 3. Well, the nice thing about it is that if, say, you set your program up on your vehicle for 6 years, you can cancel that coverage and you get a prorated refund back based on time and miles that, say, you want to put a warranty on the next one. Your driving habits might go over the miles of the normal factory coverage, but not time. You can use that credit to apply that towards a new coverage. So a lot of people like that where there's no lapse. They just continue on and say, hey, just transfer my credit and I want the same coverage. Or, hey, I'm going to keep this one a little bit less time. Instead of 6 years, let's do 5 years. But a lot of people like to know that if they have an issue, it's there. No surprises. They bring it in, we
security.
Fix it.
Security for them.
Because what's bad for the service contracts as a whole is it's not like the vehicle. We're selling this. We're selling a piece of paper. You're selling fear, doubt, and uncertainty. Because I can't guarantee a moving mechanical item. I'd like to say that we're selling quality products. That's why we offer these vehicles. But I can't promise anything. You can have it for 5 years and never have an issue. Your extended coverage goes out and boom, that next day the engine goes bad.
It's possible.
It's possible. Or you might not ever have an issue, period, but you had the service contract in place to where if you did, it was there.
You didn't have to worry about it. Yeah, and I like that.
Right.
Yeah. Still talking about sales. Now, these are questions that I find that people want to know. Maybe sometimes they're afraid to ask or they're intimidated by a salesperson, but loan or lease, what do you prefer? Or again, does that depend on a situation, and what would you say?
It's always situational based on the customer. Loan versus lease is going to depend on driving habits. If you drive 20,000 miles a year, financially, leasing is not a smart option. If you're one who trades every couple years and you have a negative equity situation, to where we call it the snowball effect, when you take a depreciating item and tack it on to another one, it grows and grows and grows. Leasing is a good option to get out of that. We have a lot of older people that lease. One thing that's never promised is life itself.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to older folks, they like to know, hey, if I'm in a lease, if something happens, the vehicle goes back to General Motors, they sell and they try to recoup some of the funds that they lost from you passing away. There's built-in gap insurance, which as an insurance agent you're very familiar with. If you have an accident, I don't want to say you walk away scot-free, but you essentially do. It's built into the lease. It really just depends.
Mm-hmm.
And there's vehicles you buy and there's vehicles you lease. Like you typically don't lease a Tahoe or a Suburban.
Mm-hmm.
Financially, you can own it for less. An Equinox, Chevy Trax, sometimes you can lease it for half of what a monthly payment would be. But the less you drive, the better off you are. It's going to make your payment cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't know that either. So like when you see all these really, really cheap lease examples, $99 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you read the fine print, hey, it's this model, this kind of equipment with $5,000 down, and that vehicle doesn't really exist.
Mm-hmm.
All it does is get you in the door or have you call in to ask about it. They get you in and say, hey, here's what it really is. Well, they just wasted your time. You're probably upset, and it still wasn't properly explained to you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Would you say then that maybe an older person that is driving, and I'm talking little miles, like the I'm going to church on Sunday car, that they're $5,000 a year or less, that would be a smart option for them is to lease?
it can be,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of times that's when the family gets involved when it is that older person. But the key thing is for a lot of people too is that say you are one who you like to always be under warranty.
Mm-hmm.
And you get bored with things. Well, instead of financing a vehicle plus extended coverage and constantly doing that, risking negative equity, you can trade every couple of years and always be under coverage as long as you drive 12,000 miles a year or less.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people like myself, I never pay a vehicle off. If I keep a vehicle a year, I'm doing good.
Okay.
Because, that's pretty, I want one of those. What's
On
my
to the
vehicle
next one.
worth? And move on to the next one. But in a lease, I don't have to worry about trying to make sure I'm covering my negative equity if I have any, because
Okay.
I'm not immune.
Yeah. Yeah.
A couple vehicles ago, I had to put a significant amount of money down because my habits had caught up to me.
Right.
Yeah, it finally nipped me, so I had to move on. But it's just depending on the customer.
Let's talk about that because you mentioned two different things there. You talked about a snowball effect, rolling negative equity on and it growing larger, and then you talked about gap insurance. So if you sell or offer gap to that customer, how much of that negative equity can be covered in that gap? Is there a limit? Do you know?
So based on vehicle value, of course, it's dependent on the market at the time. If I remember right, don't quote me on this, please. I've heard the number 120% of
Okay.
loan value.
Mm-hmm.
But part of the process too is that we can, legally in the state of Indiana, we cannot offer you gap insurance if you are borrowing 80% or less of that vehicle's LTV or loan to value. So say you buy a $30,000 vehicle, but you only finance 20. I can't sell you gap insurance because you already have equity built into the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
But the beauty of gap insurance is that say you do have that negative equity, say you roll $5,000 in negative equity over into your next vehicle, then you wreck it. So then say you have a $20,000 loan, insurance comes back and says, hey, it's worth 11
Mm-hmm.
because you had that 5,000 you rolled over plus 4,000 and more negative. Well, then what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we have a lot of people say, well, I don't have the cash to eat some of that. I have to roll it into the next one.
Mm-hmm.
That snowball already doubled in size. So that's where money down is key too, which is part of the sales process.
Mm-hmm.
We have to explain, hey, money down is not the gospel, it's not required, but here's what it does for you. Because a lot of people don't realize on a finance side, every $1,000 you put down, that's going to change your payment roughly $20 a month. On a lease, it's $30.
Very good. Okay.
So, if you put a little bit of skin in the game, it might be some really good protection for you. But when people...
So tell me those numbers again, because that would be a good number for people to keep in mind.
So when you finance a vehicle, we always say, hey, if I want a $200 payment, that's going to be a $10,000 vehicle. And that's not the gospel. That is WAC, WAC, with approved credit.
Okay.
So every $1,000 you finance is $20 a month. So simple rule, 10,000, 200, 20,000, 400. But say, hey, I want this $20,000 vehicle, but I want a $300 a month payment.
Mm-hmm.
Well, simple math, you're going to put around $5,000 down. Because there's two things we can't avoid: Uncle Sam, and we have a $75 title fee. Some dealers call it a title fee, processing fee, doc fee. That's the only fee we have, which has helped gain us some sales too. Simple. These are the things we can't avoid. Here's the vehicle, tax, title, here you go. It makes it a lot easier too, because then it's less arguing. There's nothing worse than when you have a committed offer from a customer and then you say, hey, there's a $500 processing fee. Well, you might have just undone all that negotiating that you just did. Gaining the trust, and you throw that out there, you kind of screw the pooch. I mean, you can't do that.
Right. Yeah, I get that. Yeah. Sales aside, car sales aside, what would be your best day ever? What would that include?
For work?
It can be for work. What would be this is the happiest day Brooks has had? What would that be?
This is so cheesy, but if I wake up, and vacation, whatever, if I wake up on the beach in like a condo, I put on a hoodie and I grab a cup of coffee and I walk. I walk through the waves. I walk down the beach. That's kind of my happy place. I don't know why. It always has been. But I like to spend a lot of time with friends and family. That's kind of where I get my fill. So pretty much any time I can go out and do things with friends and family, whether it's vacationing, just hanging out, just quality time. And I'm not hard to please, but normally my best day ever is probably not at work. No offense. But as long as I'm not at home.
Yeah, I get it. That's fantastic. I love it. Yeah. Hey, tell the people how to get a hold of you.
Multiple ways. I don't give my cell phone, unfortunately, but you can reach me at the dealership, 824-0900. That'll just ring into the general line. They'll say who you need to speak to. Just say, hey, I need to talk to Brooks. You can reach me on Facebook. If you don't want to text me, you can send me a message on Facebook Messenger, or you can email me. My first initial B, last name LeFever, LEFEVER, at HidayMotors.com, or just stop in. I always like to joke, and Mike's heard this before, that I work in an aquarium. I'm in that giant glass box. I can see the world go by, and I'm like a fish just swimming back and forth. So even if you just stop in and say, hey, I saw your video, I just want to see what Hiday Motors is all about, I'd love to show you around and see what I can do to possibly help you or a family member in the future. So
absolutely,
it's car karma. I might not sell you something today, but if you feel as though you'd be treated well, or you feel like you can trust me, 5 years from now I might see you again.
Brooks LeFever, beachcomber, snake charmer, and America's greatest car salesman.
That's right.
Thanks, buddy.
Appreciate you.